The message came through while I was elbow deep in a server rack at 2 in the morning. Family meeting concluded. You're being removed as a partner, effective immediately. My uncle sent it. 16 words, no punctuation at the end. Like he couldn't be bothered to finish the thought. And before I could even set my screwdriver down, my cousin reacted to it. A little thumbs up. He gave my own erasure a thumbs up. I sat back on my heels in that cold data closet, the hum of the fans filling my ears, and I waited for the second message. The "we need to talk," the "let me explain." It never came. The thumbs up just sat there glowing, the way a bruise sits under the skin before it darkens. I'm a systems administrator. I've spent the last 9 years building and maintaining every piece of digital infrastructure my family's company runs on. When a system fails, you don't scream at the screen. You don't ask the server why it betrayed you. You isolate the problem, you contain it, and you fix it. So that's what I did. I stood up. I brushed the dust off my jeans and I started thinking like the engineer they always treated, like a glorified IT guy instead of the partner my late grandmother made me on paper. My name is on the founding documents. That was Grandma's doing. Back when she still ran things before the stroke took her speech and then took her, she'd pulled me aside at my college graduation and told me she'd put me down as a 15% stakeholder in Halloran Freight, the trucking and logistics company my great-grandfather started in 1961. You're the only one who actually understands how this thing breathes, she'd told me. I was 22. I thought she was just being sweet. Turns out she saw something the rest of them didn't. For 9 years I ran the dispatch software, the fleet GPS network, the payroll system, the customer database, the email servers, the website that brought in 40% of our freight contracts. I built the routing algorithm that cut our fuel costs by 19%. I personally migrated us off the ancient on-premise system that crashed every other Tuesday and onto a clean cloud setup that I architected from scratch. I did it nights and weekends mostly because during the day my uncle had me helping out with whatever broke. A printer jam, a frozen spreadsheet, his personal laptop that he kept infecting with malware because he clicked every link in every email. They paid me $61,000 a year. For a senior systems role running a $7 million operation, I checked the market rate once. I should have been making double, but every time I brought up a raise, my uncle would get this pained look and say, "Sweetheart, it's a family business. We all sacrifice. You'll get yours when the time comes." The time came all right. Just not the way he meant it. That night, kneeling in the server room, I pulled up the admin console on my phone. Every single system the company ran went through credentials only I held. Not because I'd hidden anything. Because nobody else had ever bothered to learn. My uncle didn't know the difference between a router and a hard drive. My cousin thought the cloud was a metaphor. I didn't delete anything. Deleting would have been a crime. And I am not stupid. Deleting also would have hurt the drivers, the dispatchers, the actual people who depended on those systems to do their jobs and feed their kids. I'd never punish them for what the family did. What I did was quieter than that. I went into the master administrator account and I removed my uncle's emergency recovery email, the one that would let him reset passwords if I were ever unreachable. I replaced it with a throwaway address I'd made years ago and forgotten about. Then I went to the licensing portal for the routing software. Here's the thing nobody understood. That algorithm, the one saving us 19% on fuel, was something I'd written. It ran on a personal developer license tied to my own name, my own account, because the company was too cheap to pay for the enterprise tier and I'd gotten tired of asking. I'd been subsidizing the whole operation out of a $140 a month subscription on my own credit card for 3 years. I didn't cancel it. Canceling sends a notification. Instead, I went into the billing settings, removed my payment card, and switched off auto-renew. The license had 11 days left on the cycle. In 11 days, quietly, with no warning email, because I'd also unchecked the notification box, the software would simply stop optimizing routes. Trucks would start taking the long way. Fuel costs would climb back up, and nobody would understand why because nobody but me knew the system existed. It was a slow leak in a tire they didn't know they had. I should have felt sick. That's the thing they conditioned into me for 9 years, the reflex to feel guilty for protecting myself. For so long I'd been the one who stayed late, who covered, who kept the lights on while they took clients to steak dinners and called it networking. But sitting there in the dark, I didn't feel guilt. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt clean. You don't apologize to a system you've secured. You just close the panel and walk away. I locked the server room behind me. I drove home. I slept 8 hours for the first time in I can't remember how long. The next morning, I didn't wake up to remorse. I woke up to a siege. My phone had 19 missed calls, 14 voicemails, a text from my cousin that just said, "What did you deal?" I made coffee first. I let it brew while the phone buzzed itself across the counter like an angry insect. Then I sat down and played the first voicemail. It was my uncle. "You little ingrate." His voice came through tight and shaking. "After everything this family gave you, you think you can sabotage us and walk away? I will bury you. I'll make sure you never work in this state again. Call me back in the next hour or you'll regret it." I deleted it. He talked about everything the family gave me like there was a ledger somewhere with my name in the red. But I had a ledger too. I'd been keeping it in my head for years. Every entry, every deposit nobody ever acknowledged. 5 years ago, my uncle came to me white-faced because the company couldn't make payroll. A client had stiffed us on a $400,000 contract and our cash reserves were gone. 22 drivers were about to miss their checks. He didn't have it. The bank wouldn't extend the line of credit. And I had savings, the savings I'd scraped together living in a one-bedroom apartment and driving a 14-year-old Corolla while my cousin leased a new truck every 2 years. I gave them $11,000 to cover the gap. He called it a loan. I never saw a dime of it back. 2 weeks later, my aunt posted about their cruise to the Bahamas. Then there was my cousin's wedding. They needed someone to handle the tech, which turned into me building the entire wedding website, managing the RSVP system, and paying the $4,000 deposit on the venue when his card got declined. Because of course it did, because he'd maxed it out on a boat. "I'll get you back next month," he said. That was 3 years ago. I'm still waiting. But the worst entry in the ledger wasn't money. It was the story they told about me. When I was 19, my parents died within 8 months of each other. Dad's heart, then mom's grief, basically. I was a sophomore in college, and suddenly I was alone in the world, except for my dad's side of the family, the Hallorans. And they took me in, sort of. They let me sleep in the guest room. And then, slowly, they made me the family project. The poor orphan they generously rescued. My aunt loved telling that version at dinner parties. We didn't have to take her in, but family is family. Meanwhile, I was the one cleaning their gutters and fixing their Wi-Fi and doing their taxes. They never let me forget I was a charity case. Even after Grandma made me a partner, even after I single-handedly modernized the company, I was still the kid they'd done a favor for. I let them believe it. I lied for them, smiled at their parties, played the grateful niece, because some broken part of me still wanted to belong to something after losing my parents. I poured my coffee and stood at my kitchen window watching the morning traffic. For 9 years I'd been their backbone, their wallet, and their PR fantasy all at once. I wasn't family to them. I was infrastructure. And infrastructure, when it's done being taken for granted, has a funny way of going offline. My phone rang again. My aunt this time. I almost let it go, but curiosity got the better of me, so I answered without saying anything. "There you are." Her voice was syrup over steel. "Honey, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Your uncle was upset, he says things. We're a family. Now, the website's acting strange and the dispatch board won't load for half the trucks, and I'm sure you can fix it. You always fix everything. Just come in and we'll sort out this partner thing later, okay?" The dispatch board wasn't loading because the certificate I maintained had expired at midnight and would need manual renewal, something I'd been doing quietly every 90 days for years. Another invisible thread. Another thing that only worked because I was holding it up. I don't work there anymore, I said. Uncle removed me, effective immediately. His words. There was a pause. Don't be dramatic, just come in. I hung up. 20 minutes later, a new voicemail. My uncle again, but different now. Lower. The voice he used when he wanted to remind me he held the leash. I've been talking to a lawyer, he said, and we've been looking into some things. Those licenses, that software, you've been running company operations through personal accounts. That's a liability. That could be considered fraud. Theft of company resources. You restore everything by end of day and walk away quiet, and maybe I don't have to make some calls. You understand me? I sat with that one a while. He had it exactly backwards, of course. I'd been spending my own money to keep the company running, and now he wanted to twist that into me stealing. But the threat underneath was real. He wasn't just angry. He was trying to take the one thing I built entirely on my own, my reputation, my career, my name in an industry where everybody knows everybody. In my line of work, we have a term for what he was doing. Privilege escalation. When someone with limited access tries to grab control of the whole system by exploiting a weakness, you don't negotiate with that. You revoke their access and you log everything. So I called a lawyer too. Not just any lawyer. I called the one my grandmother had used for 30 years. His name was Mr. Portfolio. An old estate attorney was in office that smelled like pipe smoke and leather. And when I gave my name, his secretary put me right through. I was actually about to call you, he said, and something in his tone made my stomach drop. Your grandmother's affairs are still settling. But there's something you need to know before tomorrow. Tomorrow, the reading of the supplemental will. A pause. She left instructions that weren't part of the main estate. Sealed. To be opened 18 months after her passing. That's tomorrow, 10 a.m., at the house. Your uncle and your cousin have already been notified. I'd advise you to be there. I closed my eyes. Grandma had been gone a year and a half. I still missed her in the dumb small moments, like when I'd fix something complicated and have nobody to tell who'd actually get it. She was the only one in that family who ever looked at me and saw a person instead of a function. Be there, Mr. the attorney said gently, and don't tell them what you know about the company yet. Let it play out. I spent that afternoon not grieving but preparing. I knew exactly who'd be in that room and exactly what they thought of me. So I gave them what they expected. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and I practiced. I let my shoulders round forward. I pulled my hair back plain. I dug out an old cardigan, gray, a size too big. The cuffs gone soft and pilled. The orphan they rescued. The charity case who couldn't manage a checkbook. I let myself become her again, just for one more day. In my work, you learn that the best way to get full access to a hostile system is to look harmless. You don't announce that you're the administrator. You let them think you're a guest account, right up until you're not. The Halloran house sat on a hill outside town. White columns and a circular drive. The kind of place that looked like old money and was actually mortgaged to the rafters. I'd learn how deep that went soon enough. The study smelled like furniture polish and money that was running out. My uncle sat ramrod straight in a leather chair. My aunt beside him in pearls she'd had appraised twice trying to sell. My cousin slouched on the couch scrolling his phone, one knee bouncing. When I came in wearing my sad gray cardigan, my aunt's mouth tugged into something that wanted to be sympathy and landed on contempt. "Oh, you came," she said. "There's coffee in the kitchen if you want to make yourself useful, hon." I looked at the floor. "I'm okay," I murmured. I sat in the corner, small, and pulled my sleeves down over my hands. Mr. the attorney came in carrying a thick folder and a sealed envelope. He sat behind Grandpa's old desk, slid on his glasses, and didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Thank you all for coming. Ruth Halloran left a supplemental instruction to be read at this time. I'll get to it. But first I'm obligated to read the full standing of her estate as it intersects with Halloran Freight, because the two are connected." My uncle leaned forward, the chair creaking. "We just want this wrapped up. It's been a hard year, I'm sure. he said, dry as chalk. He read the numbers, and the room changed temperature. It turned out Grandma had never actually transferred her controlling share of the company to my uncle the way he'd been operating as if she had. She'd held 51% until her death, and that share, per the main will, had gone into a trust. The trust terms had a condition nobody had read carefully. Control of the majority share would pass to whichever partner the company's own operational records demonstrated had materially sustained the business in the 18 months following her death. Mr. the attorney looked up over his glasses. The supplemental instruction names an independent auditor to review those records and determine the recipient. That review was completed last week. My uncle's knee had stopped bouncing. So had my cousin's phone. The audit found that one partner personally financed company payroll during a liquidity crisis, personally maintained all operational software infrastructure at personal expense, and held the only valid administrative credentials keeping the company functional. He turned a page. The controlling 51% share, combined with the 15% already held, passes to the granddaughter. To you, he said, looking directly at me. Silence. The kind that has a sound, a high, thin ringing. Then my uncle exploded. That's insane. She's an IT girl. She doesn't know the first thing about running a freight company. My mother was clearly not in her right mind. She had a stroke. For God's sake, your mother executed these instructions 4 years before her stroke, Mr. the attorney said calmly. I witnessed it myself. My aunt turned to me with that wet, performative pity. Honey, you can't possibly handle this. The taxes alone, the lawsuits, the regulatory filings, you'd be eaten alive. Let your uncle manage it for you the way family does. We'd never let anything happen to you. I let my chin tremble. I let my eyes go glassy. I gave them the performance they'd paid 9 years for. And while I did it, I watched. Because in my work, you learn to read a system by its stress signals. And these 3 were lighting up like a server about to crash. My uncle kept checking his watch, sweat shining at his hairline. His old money loafers had a worn-through sole. My aunt's pearls, I'd find out later, were the appraised and rejected kind. My cousin had a payday loan app open on his phone. I could see the logo from across the room. They weren't rich people fighting over a windfall. They were drowning people grabbing for a life raft. The cruelty, the disownment, all of it had been desperation wearing a nice suit. So I played frightened. I said maybe they were right. Maybe it was too much for me. I asked in a small voice whether there was any way for someone else to handle it, just so I wouldn't make mistakes. My uncle's eyes lit up so fast it would have been funny if it weren't so sad. He said yes, absolutely. There was a simple process. Mr. Zabel, the attorney, perfectly straight-faced, explained that any partner could file for operational guardianship over an heir deemed unfit to manage the inheritance, but it required a signed declaration. My uncle didn't read it twice. He signed. My aunt signed. They made my cousin sign, too, as a witness and co-petitioner. 3 signatures declaring under penalty of perjury that I was incapable of managing my own affairs. Then I sat up straight. I pushed my sleeves up. And Mr. the attorney slid his glasses up his nose and turned to the last page of the trust. There's a clause I haven't read yet, he said. Ruth Halloran anticipated exactly this. Any party who files to challenge or seize control from the rightful heir, by claiming incompetence or any other means, forfeits all interest in the company and any pending distribution from the estate. The room went white quiet. My uncle had a separate $200,000 cash bequest coming from Grandma's personal estate, the only liquid money he had left in the world. His face drained of color as he understood what he'd just signed away. That money, I'd learned, was already promised to a lender who held a second mortgage on the white-columned house. You tricked us, he said, and his voice had gone to gravel. I met his eyes. For the first time in 9 years, I didn't look away. It wasn't a trick, I said. It was a test. You had every chance to treat me like family. You chose to treat me like a thing you could throw away. You failed. He had maybe a few hours before his lender called the note. He asked me, then begged me, to undo the licensing change, to restore the routing software, to come back and make it right as a family. Said he'd cut me in. Said we'd split it. I picked up my phone. For a second, he thought I was calling to restore the systems. I called the police because somewhere between his second and third voicemail, he'd made a threat that crossed from ugly into criminal, and Mr. the attorney had told me to log everything. I'd logged it. They left the house in silence. Within 3 months, the bank moved on the second mortgage, and the white-columned house went up for sale. The leased trucks went back. The country club membership lapsed. The whole expensive illusion folded up like a tent at the end of a fair. I kept the company. I renegotiated my own salary first, which felt absurd and wonderful, signing my name on both sides of the line. I gave the drivers and dispatchers raises, the people who'd never once treated me like a charity case. I renewed that routing license under a proper enterprise account the same afternoon, and the trucks kept finding the short way home. On my first night alone in Grandma's old office, I found a photo tucked behind a row of binders. It was me at 19, a few weeks after my parents died, standing stiff at a family barbecue in clothes that weren't mine, trying to smile, not belonging to anything. The girl who thought being useful was the same as being loved. I held it for a long time. Then I framed it and put it on the desk where I could see it, not as a wound, as a reminder of who I'd been carrying all those years and who I didn't have to be anymore. If you're still waiting for the people who threw you out to come back and finally see your worth, stop waiting. They won't change. But you can change the locks, change your name on the door, and build something they can never take from you again. I did, and the lights are still on. For 9 years, I thought being needed was the same as being loved. I kept the lights on, paid the gaps nobody else would cover, and smiled at parties where my own aunt called me the orphan they generously took in. The truth I missed for so long is that none of it bought me a seat at the table. It only made me a more convenient thing to use. The day my uncle fired me in 16 words and my cousin gave my erasure a thumbs up, the bill they'd been running up for 9 years finally came due. That's how it works. Cause and effect don't care how nice the house looks from the road. They treated a person like infrastructure, and infrastructure, ignored long enough, goes offline. What saved me wasn't luck, and it wasn't revenge. Looking back, 3 things carried me out of that study with a company in my name. The first was that I refused to become them. I never deleted a file that would have hurt a driver or a dispatcher who'd done nothing wrong. I logged everything honestly and let their own signatures, their own greed, do the work. When you're holding all the keys, the easiest thing in the world is to burn the building down. I didn't. And that line I wouldn't cross is the only reason a judge would ever take my side. The second was that I stopped reacting and started thinking. I'd spend years asking for a raise, like a child asking permission. Sitting in that cold server room, I finally read the system the way I read every other system, by looking at where the real control lived. The licenses. The credentials. Grandma Ruth's trust that nobody else bothered to read closely. The answer was always there. I just had to be calm enough to see it instead of bleeding out emotionally all over the floor. And the third was the hardest. I had to keep standing when my uncle threatened my license, my career, the one thing I'd built alone. It would have been so much easier to cave, to fix it as a family, to crawl back into the gray cardigan and stay small forever. Staying upright when someone is trying to ruin you isn't loud. It's quiet. It's making the coffee, playing the next voicemail, calling your own lawyer, and showing up to the room anyway. If you take anything from what happened to me, take this. Don't wait for the people who threw you out to suddenly see your worth, because they built their comfort on not seeing it. Protect your name even when nobody's watching. Get quiet enough to understand the system you're actually in. And when they push, plant your feet. Grandma Ruth saw all of that in me at 22 when I couldn't see it in myself. It took me 9 years and 1 cruel text to finally believe her.